As you may be aware, there is a lot going on in the USA at the moment with the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. However, what you might not be aware of is that the British police seem to refuse to investigate it, whilst the French and obviously the US police are investigating it. So I'm going to attempt to do a weekly report on what's taking place on the Ghislaine Maxwell trial in New York. Hey everyone, welcome back to Political X. For more knowledge and updates on UK, European and US politics, make sure you subscribe to this channel. So let's start off with the first witness that turned up on day 2 of the trial, who is only known as Jane. Jane, according to her statement, met Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein in 1994 at a summer camp that she attended. She was 14 years old, and Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were very happy, according to Jane, that they had been able to meet, and they were so happy that they invited her and her parents to regularly come over to their apartment in Florida, which Jane so happened to be also living near too. Jane and her family were strapped for cash, so any support was obviously appreciated. After several months of being at the house, things started to turn in a different way for Jane. It wasn't the normal thing of just coming over, sitting by the pool, or hanging out, or discussing how her day was, or what things were taking place in her life. According to Jane, this all began to change as a result of Epstein taking her into a private room and doing sexual activities with her, bearing in mind that Jane is underage during this period. She also recorded how Ghislaine Maxwell and her friends would regularly walk around topless or naked around the pool. She also alleged that Ghislaine Maxwell also joined in with Epstein in these sexual activities. On day 2, there was the beginning of the cross-examination, but by day 3 there was an interesting punch being pulled by the defense. Maxwell's lawyer, Menninger, did create one powerful moment when she introduced the fact that in a document prepared by Jane's personal lawyer prior to trial, Jane named only Epstein as her abuser, while making no mention of Maxwell. This could undercut Jane's testimony that Maxwell was present and intimately involved in some of the abuse. This appears to not be a major win for the defense, however, it's part of an overall plan. This is crucial for the grand strategy, which involves convincing the jury that Maxwell had been retconned into the case, that Ghislaine was never part of the government's narrative until Epstein died, and the story suddenly required a new antagonist. Donald Trump's name once again received a shout out as the defense got Jane to testify that Epstein introduced her to Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Jane also told Menninger that she'd met Prince Andrew. Jane also made an interesting comment alleging that a British woman was involved in one of the orgies, which then begs the question, why aren't the British government, why aren't the British police investigating this when that person could still be running among us in Britain? An ex-boyfriend of Jane's also took to the stand and claimed to have dated her from 2006 to 2014. The person was called Matt. Matt testified that while they were dating, Jane had told him about this godfather figure who kept the family afloat. This was after her father had died. It was then later revealed this to be Jeffrey Epstein. He also testified that Jane had told him there was a woman at Epstein's house who'd made Jane comfortable, despite the horrors that were unfolding there. Matt contacted Jane when Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested. Jane confirmed that this was the woman she was referring to. There was also Daniel Bezelson, an assistant vice president of finance at the Interlchon Arts Camp, where Jane, as a teenager, 14, had made her first meeting with Epstein and Maxwell. Bezelson had pulled from a filing cabinet in the basement documents that showed that Epstein had attended a meeting on the day that Jane claimed they'd met, and that he was donating $250,000 to build a new structure in the Institute's grounds. Another witness, Lawrence Visoski, was the pilot for Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and was a pilot for Epstein up until 2019, which is interesting with a little detail that was said during the court case. He went on to say that he never witnessed anything and that he was even comfortable with his children being around Epstein. He also made mention of several important people, including Senators John Glenn and George Mitchell, actors Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, violinist Isaac Perlman, and Prince Andrew and Donald Trump. It's important to note that both Jane and Visoski did not suggest there was any wrongdoing done by any of the people made mention within the trial. However, there was this sense of allegiance to Maxwell being given off by Visoski. With a comment such as that, you would have thought he would have quit in 2008 when Epstein was convicted of soliciting a minor for prostitution. But he didn't. He continued to fly for Epstein until he got arrested in 2019. Maybe the fact that Epstein paid for the college education of both Visoski's daughters and gifted Visoski 40 acres of land in New Mexico helped the pilot to suppress any suspicions. One of these things we might not ever know. The next witness to be called up was Juan Alessi. He was called up on day 4. He worked as the manager for the Florida property run and owned by Epstein and Maxwell. He essentially worked as a butler, but he was also caught testifying that he took the instructions given to him by Maxwell and Epstein as a kind of warning, and that he was to be blind, deaf, and dumb to everything taking place within the property. Along with Alessi's testimony, we also were shown floor plans of the estate. We were also shown a very interesting document that was created as a worker's manual by Maxwell, giving clear instructions as to what the workers should and should not do, such as how to address guests, not to give eye contact to Epstein, also making sure that your hands weren't in your pockets, not talking about the problems you were going through on that day. I've included that instruction manual in the description. Alessi also testified that Jane was at the house numerous times starting in 1994, and that she looked like she was 14 or 15 years old at the time. He said he sometimes drove her to Epstein's house because she didn't have a driving license. He also said that Epstein often had women hanging about at his poolside, and that they were topless about 75% of the time. He also stated how silly the system was getting by 2002, which is when he left, where messages would have to be emailed to the front desk from Epstein, which would then be relayed to Alessi instead of direct contact. He also said you should never look at his eyes, just look at another part of the room to answer him. Alessi stood his ground throughout the court case and clearly stated that if he was aware of any of wrongdoings taking place, he would have dealt with it immediately. He also stated that he did go into rooms and had to clear up after the partying that was taking place with Epstein and his masseurs. For me, the most shocking thing that came out of this was how young Jane was and how this took place in 1994. The reason I've put up Thames Valley Police is I would ask them to begin investigations into what was taking place in Oxfordshire. If we know that Jeffrey Epstein met Ghislaine Maxwell at some point between 1988 and 1991, that means she was spending time in Oxfordshire. If that is the case, then I would hope that Thames Valley Police would get themselves together, an investigative team, to start looking into what Ghislaine Maxwell was doing in Oxfordshire over that period. Just want to say a big thank you to all my patrons. It really does help make this channel. I hope you enjoyed my political observations this week. If you'd like to support me, please share the video with others and post about it on social media. If you're keen for more, subscribe, comment, like, and hit that notification button. Thanks for listening, and see you next time on Political X.